This is Peter Reyna from Spires, and you're watching RichardMetalFan.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Richard Metal Fan Interviews. This is episode number 133, and today's guest we're talking to Peter Reyna. Peter is the bass player for the band Spires, a symphonic kind of metal band from Boston, Massachusetts. Today we're going to be talking to him about what got him into metal, what made him want to play bass, as well as going through the Spires albums, as well as some session work and other bands that he's also been involved with. So, without further ado, let's go talk to Peter.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm here with Peter Reyna from Spires and Firewing. So, how are you doing today, Peter?
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, it's so awesome to have you here. So kind of the format is I want to do like a quick rundown of your catalog, is talk about like your journey as an artist from where you started to now. But let's just dive it back into the very beginning. What were the first bands that got you into metal? What made you want to slap at a bass?
Yeah, so I mean, at a young age, I was in like middle school, so probably seventh-ish grade. Um, I had a friend group that were all playing instruments and nobody played bass. So I decided to start playing the bass parts on a guitar. And I had a lot of fun with that. Before that, I took like guitar lessons and stuff, but that was when it really connected for me was just kind of like getting to play with other people. So that got me into it, and all of my friends were sort of into like Iron Maiden and Bullet for My Valentine and stuff like that. And then, from there, I sort of went into, and also Him is a notable one, because I've been thinking about them recently, seeing Villavalo on tour and stuff. And then from there, I just sort of went on my own path and discovered bands like Obscura, and more tech death and death metal and stuff like that. And that kind of made me want to continue. At the same time, though, I learned, I sort of discovered jazz and jazz bass playing and stuff like that. And obviously that was taking place at my public school too. There were jazz ensembles and everything. And I thought, if I want to do this professionally, I should learn both and really get a sense for the bass. So at the same time, I started kind of working on the upright bass as well.
Awesome. And from what I saw in Metal Archives, I believe your first band was called Morbid Vitality. Tell me about that.
That's not exactly my first band. I started doing gigs with a blues band, and before that, like a folk band, so kind of locally in the Boston area. I was in high school, and it was just a bunch of older dudes. And so I would do like just do gigs from like Friday night through Sunday, and make a couple $100. And I thought I was like the shit for doing that. Especially back in high school, because that's kind of a big thing. Morbid Vitality was a band from like just high school friends and stuff like that. So that was something that didn't really ever. I never like recorded anything with them or did too much with them, but it was sort of like a young sort of enthusiastic thing where you all get into somebody's basement and start playing death metal. So
All right. All right. And from what I also saw on there, I believe you have some other bands called Ghost Train, Zixari, I probably butchered that, and Meraki. Tell me about those bands. I can't really find like anything online.
yeah, those were more just like kind of youthful projects, going through high school and stuff like that. So those weren't, those were things where some of them weren't even actual bands that I like played with in a public sense. They were just things that I had sort of done at a time when you're a kid and you're just messing around with stuff. So yeah.
All right. And then how did Seven Spires form? Because I believe y'all formed 2013.
I think 2013 is when Jack and Adrian met and sort of started coming up with stuff that became Seven Spires. Um, so I had known Jack probably around 2013 as well, which is when he moved to Boston for Berkeley, to study there. And I met him through just jamming with other people, as with like some of the names that you've mentioned and stuff, just like these kind of loose type engagements where you're just playing with friends or doing things like that. So I met Jack, and then a couple of years later, in maybe 2015, 2014 or so, I go to the Palladium to see Arch Enemy, and I see that my friend Jack is on the support stage playing with his band. And so I saw him, we said hi, and I said, man, this is great that you're doing this. If you ever need a bass player, let me know. And he said, funny thing, we will need a bass player soon. And so he called me, and I played all the songs, and sort of did the audition that way, and the rest is history. I mean, Dovis joined shortly afterwards. So there's a story that, or sort of an understanding that we met at Berkeley, but we really met because of Berkeley. We met in Boston because everybody was there at the same time, and our paths crossed. So yeah, so that's sort of how it came to be. There was a period before any of the actual albums were released where there were like another bass player and drummer, and actually there was keyboard player or something like that too, at one point. But that was all sort of when the band was first figuring out, like, playing local shows and that sort of thing. So Jack and Adrian had the idea since 2013, and it was sort of, Seven Spires since then. But it really became Seven Spires in 2015 when Dovis and I joined. So.
All right. And I know this year is also 10 years of Seven Spires as a band. Like, did you think that Seven Spires would be around for 10 years?
I certainly hoped so back then, and I hope we're around for another 100 years. So.
All right. All right. And what was like the recording of the debut album Solveig like?
That was cool. That was cool. I was in high school, wrapping up my last year, and I think we were all, like, I didn't really know much recording. I had done a decent amount of recording in studios and stuff with other bands and sort of other, like, sort of loose, low level freelance type stuff. Um, but so, and Jack was just starting to get into, like, what engineering was like, and stuff like that. And it was really cool because Adrian had, and Jack had such great song ideas and stuff like that, and it was my first chance to really creatively have an impact and stuff like that. During that album recording process was actually the only time that I worked a non-music industry related job as well. So I was like a pharmacy technician in my last year of high school, and so I would come from the pharmacy gig. I would be really pissed off because I didn't like that job, and go and record the Spire stuff that I had been working on so hard, and that was really cool. There's a lot of special stuff about that experience, just being in Jack's, like, college apartment, working on the music and all of that stuff. But really, I'm amazed with anytime I go back to listen to it, I'm amazed with how far we've come, but also the how well that album has held up, even for me and for us as musicians. Usually you can be critical of yourself in those settings, but and of course we still are, but I love it. It's such a warm memory and such a nice capture of a period in all of our lives that we've really started with together. So.
All right. And then tell me, because around also that same time you did Unflesh with Savior. Like, nobody ever talks about that album. Tell me about like Unflesh, what they're about.
Yeah, so that was like 1 or 2 years after Solveig was recorded, but the release dates were probably similar, I think. But that was when I was in my second year at Berkeley, and Dovis was in his first, I think. Was when that started happening, and so basically we met this guy at Berkeley, who was the mind behind Unflesh, and awesome guitar player. Like, Dovis and I were getting. I was already into tech death, and I sort of started to show him some stuff. He had known about death metal for a long time, but I think he was really starting to realize that he wanted to do that. And stuff, and so yeah, so we were working on the music. We just kind of clicked. We all really liked what the other person was doing, and we said, okay, let's make the album. And it was great. I mean, Ryan, the main guy, is such a genius musician, and such a great player and everything. And so he presented these songs, and we really liked them. So it was just one of those things where you hear the music and then you can't stop thinking about it. And so yeah, so we sort of went along with it, and really, I think, grew from our contributions to that. We worked hard to play the fucking best stuff that we could, and that's how that turned out. And I still really love that album. I wish like the mix was different or something like that, but you can say that about pretty much everything. But that's also a really, really special one.
All right. And then kind of going back in the Seven Spires, I know in 2020 you released Emerald Seas, which in my opinion is probably my favorite Seven Spires album out of the three. And
Awesome.
usually with the debut album, you have like your entire life to write in. There's a lot of hype with the first album. But when it came
Mhm.
to making Emerald Seas, did you feel like pressure to follow up Sylvain?
Mm-mm. I mean, I think the pressure came from, again, sort of still being kind of young and not knowing um, what the process was like entirely. We've done something once, so question is, when you do something once, okay, now do it again. So, there was a little bit of pressure like that, but it was more, I think, born from unfamiliarity with the process still and everything. Um, but at that time, we had already advanced so much as musicians, and with technical ability in terms of running sessions, and we had already done a lot more sessions. All of us had either graduated or been through a significant amount of the Berkeley schooling at that time. So so that was cool. And that's a very special album. I remember the sessions for that too, and it's sort of again, it's like a capture of a certain period in your life that you share with your band members. Um, and Yeah, it was a really special experience. I think the songs really spoke to us in a different way. Adrienne grew so much with her songwriting during that period, and so the song spoke to us really well, and that was the first instance of us really starting to do things like really starting to understand how to serve the song well. And that's a credit to Adrian, that it was just she brought stuff to the table that you just couldn't not serve the song. And yeah, so I think those compositions are special, and there's a lot of like Easter egg type things in the bass parts for that album. I pretty much have bass tabs done for that. I just have to adjust the actual fingerings for them and stuff because I work in sheet music. But the bass parts are really cool. And Still to this day, I think that album really gets people for the
Yeah.
songs in particular. And what was great was that, what was a sort of an interesting thing to see was
Yeah.
the fact that it was released 1 month before the pandemic, and then the
Yeah.
pandemic happened.
Yeah.
So what I noticed was that people really sat with that album. And I think, yes, of course, it sucks that it was released right before the pandemic, but people sat and listened to that album for the first period of lockdown. And like, I think a lot of people had a very deep connection with that album because of what happened with the pandemic. And that was cool.
All right. All right. And I still think it's a great album. Like songs like Succumb and the Unmapped Darkness, still one of my
Yeah.
favorite Inspire songs.
Yeah.
And I still think it's a. I just wish you could play like Unmapped Darkness live. I've yet to see that song played live.
Yeah, yeah, we played that one in Europe
Yeah,
actually.
I was hoping you did that on the Elevite tour.
Yeah, that would be excellent. I think we'll see, but we like playing that one too, actually.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of describe it as like a metal Disney song.
Yeah, it's like that.
Yeah, and then of course that your last album, Gods of Debauchery. I love that. Love that album. One of my favorite albums from 2021. What was that like going from Emerald Seas to Gods of Debauchery?
It was cool, man. For a lot of reasons, I think it was a really, really cool album. Um, and again, like I think I think sort of now we were on the tail end of the pandemic, or not even the tail end, but sort of mid-pandemic, when we were writing that one and recording that one and stuff. Um, so album, Emerald Seas gets released, and then we have the lockdown, and the label is like, okay, let's do another one, and we're like, hell yeah. And I think it was really great to actually have all that lockdown time to write, and pretty much just to focus on the album. At the time, we didn't have a lot of other career stuff figured out. It was really still focused on just the Spires music. So we got to spend a ton of energy on that. And and it was really fantastic. So the songs, obviously, there are some noticeable differences between any of our back catalog and that album, which is very cool. So that inspired us a lot. I think, again, technically speaking, it was the most complex thing that we had done, and we really rose to the occasion. Um, like we wrote stuff, parts and things like that we couldn't necessarily play at the time, and so we sort of worked it up to the recording session. We just had ideas in our head before that of what we wanted to do, and then doing it live is a whole other thing too. So yeah, so that's a really special album. I think in a lot of ways it's my favorite so far, just because I hope every album that we release becomes my favorite album, you know.
Yeah, and I know also around that time you also have another band called Firewing, and so far you've released the first album, Resurrection. Tell me about like your other band.
Uh-huh. So yeah, so me and Dovis, we're not actually band members for that. That was another project that sort of came about in university, when we were studying. We met Kyle, who's one of our best friends. I mean, he's an awesome guy, and we have been friends for so long. So he wanted to make that album, and we're like, yeah, we'll record on it, cool. And then he wanted to do music videos, and so we did that with him and stuff like that. But we've never like done any live stuff. It's not really a band that we're a part of. It was just sort of, again, like something that we got involved with, and then he's out there doing stuff, doing live shows and things, with a different lineup and that sort of thing. And that's great. It's hard to commit to a ton of bands, to be a band member for a ton of bands. There's a lot of stuff we want to do, but usually it's best to focus on Spires or other things that we want to do that are, that sort of help us make a living and get us, to where we want to be with our personal goals and everything. But Firing is awesome, man, and every now and then we talk, and sort of talk about what Firing is doing and stuff like that. But we're not band members, so.
All right. Is there any like differences between playing with Firewing versus playing with Seven Spires?
So okay, so like I said, we haven't done a live show with Firing. So is that what you mean, or do you mean
That
like?
or just like when recording?
Yeah. Well, yes, definitely. The songwriting is way different. The style is different. The influences and everything. So I'm, for bass, I'm taking from a different inspirational source when I go for the Firing stuff. Um, I sort of go a much more like power metal kind of Angra style, of playing, which I really dig. And that's a big part of my voice. Whereas with Spires, I tend to go more of a jazz meets tech death route, on things. So yeah, it is very different, and that was one of the cool things when working on the Firewing stuff. Is like, you get to exercise a different part of your voice for sure.
All right. And I noticed also last year you did some session work. You did a Feast for Lampreys with Graveyard Abyss and a Squandered Potential with the self-titled EP. How'd you end up playing bass on those releases?
That's awesome that you found that. So I usually record about 10 albums a year.
Oh shit.
So I do a ton of different stuff. So those were cases of just the person hitting me up and saying, "Hey, I wanna work with you. For bass, I need somebody to record bass." And I'm like, "Great, awesome. Here's my rate and that kind of thing." And so I do that for jazz albums. I do that for a lot of different stuff. But the Squandered Potential stuff, actually, I knew that guy. He lived the town over from me when I was in high school. I always thought he was an awesome guitar player. He's an awesome drummer. He has cool vocals, and that was like a really cool sort of first fragmenty type, tech death thing, which I really really enjoyed being a part of. So I hope to sort of lay down bass for them again and stuff. But that's, yeah. So what you're finding here is session work that I do. So
Yeah.
so those things are just, sort of a service being exchanged. But as a musician, that's an important thing to be doing, and I think, are great examples of just like why it's so awesome to do session work. So.
Awesome. And I noticed, like, of course, this year you've released the like for Seven Spires, you did like the Prog Power from last year. What made you guys decide to record the live album? And funny enough, I was actually at that show. So tell me about like recording that live album.
Yeah, that's right. I remember you were at that. That's excellent. So yeah, so they offer recordings for every set that every band does and stuff. So it just came through the board, and it was just raw signals and stuff like that. So we had these recordings, and we were like, hey, I mean, yeah, in hindsight, afterwards, we were like, we could release this as a live album, and we did. And it came out great. I couldn't have been happier. Like on the day of the performance, we were all really happy with how we had done and everything like
Yeah.
that. And so yeah, so I thought that was super cool. But it was sort of done in reverse. Like we didn't exactly plan for that on the front end. We knew that there would be recordings, and we were thinking about how we could make something of that. So, but it sort of came to fruition after the fact. So yeah, and I mean we're super glad that everybody seems to have liked that live album a lot. I think it captures it really I think it captures really well our live energy and the differences, between a studio record and a live performance for Seven Spires. So yeah, so I think it has a really special quality to it. Um and we're really happy with that. We'd like to do more things like that in the future.
All right, and got a few more questions for you, if that's okay. Hey, I
Mhm.
always love your approach to bass, because, especially with Seven Spires, because as I think you don't gravitate towards the bass playing for the most part, but I think you find ways to link what Jack's doing with the melody and what Dovis is doing with the rhythm, but in a way that sounds creative. So, in your opinion, what's like your approach to bass?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Yeah, that is pretty much my approach. You have to be the link between the harmony and the rhythm. You know, so um, so that's a really key thing. There's so much I could say about that, but really, what I think is what I've loved the most about the music that I listen to and stuff like that is being able to pick any one instrument out and really being able to like get in touch with what it is that's happening there and then how it creates the big picture. So I usually like to play things that aren't just the riff, you know, and I like to do things that sort of are like that are complementary to that without being that itself, you know. So essentially just to complement the things that I'm actually hearing are kind of the big points for me. And again, like it comes from I don't think of a specific genre or a specific style when I'm writing. It's like I'm listening to new material and I hear something that I want to hear on it. So that's kind of it, you know. But basically, I think you nailed it. Like bridging that gap in a way is really important. And so doing something that is what the drums are doing while doing something that is what the guitar is doing is usually how I sort of realize the bass part and that sort of thing.
Awesome. And kind of also want to talk about like your bass gear, like what kind of basses you use, strings, pedals, and all that stuff.
Yeah. So okay, so my main bass with Spires now, it's the one that I used on Gods of Debauchery, is the BTB. It's an Ibanez Premium BTB, and so that's also the one that I use live all the time. So you can hear it with on the Live at Prague Power album as well, and that's got Aguilar pickups in it. I think the Ibanez premium basses are like just phenomenal instruments, and they look beautiful, they sound beautiful, they feel really good, they're resilient, and like for what you're paying for, you really get a lot. Yeah, I think they're really special basses. They have a bright sound, and a very clear sound, and I like that a lot. Um, so yeah, so that's what I use for basses. I like Elixir strings a lot because again, they have like a bright sound and they allow for a lot of like expression, and you can use vibrato and things like that. And they don't wear down super quickly either, which is nice. They sort of maintain that bright sound a lot. Um, Live, I use a dark glass vintage ultra as my main tone, and then I use a what's it called? A hyperluminal, a dark glass hyperluminal, which is a compressor pedal, and I use that as a solo boost. So whether it's a tapping thing or there are or like a lead line like in Genre of Worlds, there's or in Fearless actually, and in Genre of Worlds actually, there are bass lead lines that aren't tapping, they're like fingerstyle playing, but they need a boost. So I use that pedal to sort of give that boost live. Um, Other than that, I mean, that's kind of it. That's kind of it. I like the dark glass stuff a lot, as do many. So yeah, that's kind of the rig.
Awesome. So before we go, just want to thank you for this interview. It was great to chat with you. Is just anything else with Seven Spires or any of your other prod or Firewing you could want to promote?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you haven't already listened to our Live at Prague Power album, please check that out. And then, we are working on new stuff, and if you're looking for some more information or sort of that next level of information, we do have a Patreon that we put stuff in regularly with updates and stuff like that. So patreon.com/7spires, that's a great way to support us and to get something cool in return. So, and thank you for having me, man.
Awesome. So everybody, Peter Reyna from Seven Spires and Firewing. See you next time.